Thank you, and welcome back to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric. I'm joined by my co-host, Kevin. Welcome back for our 67th episode this week after a brief hiatus. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter/X and Instagram at Pats 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day, as well as at our website at pats300levelpod.com. So, Kevin, I know it's been a little over a month since our last podcast, which that episode was... we had a guest appearance by Jerry Thornton from Barstool Sports. So if you haven't had a chance to listen to that, we highly recommend you give that a listen. But I know a lot has happened in the last month and we haven't been on since then. But part of the reason why was we were traveling, or at least I was traveling. There were the holidays and there wasn't really much to discuss where they were already eliminated from playoff contention. Wasn't really much week in and week out talking about draft status. If they lose this, maybe they have a chance at number 2 pick or 3 pick, etc. So that's part of the reason why we didn't really do any episodes the past month. But again, there was some stuff that happened too. Mac Jones was benched. Bailey Zappi came in. They won 2 games. Team still kept playing hard, but so we wanted to have one more episode before the last week of the season, considering all the potential implications that might happen, and we didn't want that to be our first episode back. But thank you guys for hanging in and waiting for us, and let's get into this. So, Kevin, what's the first thing you want to talk about today?
So I think we have a few topics that we wanted to address, and again, one of the reasons why we kind of skipped a month or so, like Eric mentioned, was there's only so much you could say about this team, where every single week we're pretty much saying the same exact thing about what was going wrong, what was wrong with the offense, and how they're going to get better. And 3 up, 3 down was pretty much the same all the time, just based on how this team was. And we figured it wasn't really worth the juice, wasn't really worth the squeeze for those episodes. Plus, we had some commitment issues with travel and holidays and that sort of stuff. So it made sense just to kind of have a little break there and then get back to it now. I think first thing we can really discuss, just because we haven't in a while, is really what's really the Patriots now are going to be in the bottom of the league for records this year. So what's going really wrong with this team? I think we all know it's not the whole team. It's mainly just the offense. You can say special teams too. That's actually probably cost them a couple of games here, just with missed kicks. But I think everyone cares more about offense than special teams, so we're not going to really spend too much time on Chad Ryland and his yips. So offense. Again, there's 3 main kind of areas why they are where they are, and it's going to be the 3 main areas that we kind of focus on.
And
going
it's
forward.
The frustrating thing too is it's the 3 main areas, or 2 of the main areas goes back to Tom Brady's last year too.
Mm-hmm.
With the offensive line and then receivers, which granted this year there have been a lot of injuries throughout the entire roster. Offensive line didn't have the same guys starting. I think it back-to-back weeks until week 7 or week 8. You lost a lot of guys. You lost your starting left guard to begin the year, and then to end the year, you've had missed tackle, or outside of David Andrews, pretty much everyone has missed games on the offensive line. Since they can't block and pass protection, doesn't give the quarterback enough time to throw the ball, doesn't give the quarterback enough time to wait for a receiver to get open to throw it to. Our receivers haven't been that good outside of Demario Douglas and then Kendrick Bourne until he got hurt, which is another injury. But since the receivers aren't good, they're not good enough to get open. And since they're not good enough to get open quick, the quarterback doesn't have enough time to throw it when they're open, which leads to either 3 and outs, interceptions, turnovers, etc., or just not moving the ball. And because of that, you're not able to get your running game going, because they know that if you can't pass it, they're loading up the box, and that's stopping the run game. And then you also lost your top running back as well. So again, that's been, if you look at what went wrong in 2019, O-line and receivers, 2020 to an extent, also quarterback didn't really have an arm at the end of the year. 2021, the beginning of the year and end of the year, same aspect. And then just last year and this year, just the offensive line and receivers as well.
Yep. So again, offensive line, receivers, and then the third problem for this year was the quarterback position, where
Yeah.
you look at this team and how they've played and how close pretty much every game has been, except for the Cowboys and the Saints game. If you had just average, mediocre quarterback play for the entire season, they'd probably be in the playoffs and be a pretty big contender for the year, based on how
Yeah.
well this defense has played, even with the losses of Judon and Gonzalez, and Marcus Jones and Jack Jones being off his rocker for the Patriots. So
And then
it,
getting
it
JC Jackson and then him
mhm,
going out,
yeah,
where you're playing cornerbacks that weren't on the roster to begin the year as starters, and they're
mhm.
still
And they're still
playing
playing,
well. Yeah.
performing really well. So uh, it's definitely not the defense's fault, and they have one of the best defenses that they've had in a while, and they're
Yeah.
only going to continue to play better as long as this group kind of stays together. So I think that's one kind of promising thing to look to for next year is just the defense and the players that they have there. And it's just that and we'll get into this later, is about what you need to really solve for. And again, it's the offense, and it's not every position on the offense. It's just a few key areas. And one of us big is the quarterback position,
Yeah.
because obviously you can't win in this league without a good quarterback. To an extent. So we've said this multiple times. There's two ways you can win. You can win the way that the 49ers and the Dolphins and the Eagles have done, where you load up talent on offense, on a wide receiver, running back, and that way you can have a game manager kind of control the offense and give it to the playmakers. And have them be the really big options for the game. And that's one way to do it. It's hard to do that just to find all those pieces that you need.
And
Uh,
even doing that, I was talking to a friend about this yesterday, actually.
mhm,
Even doing that with accumulating the amount of talent that spending to accumulate the amount of talent you have, you're really putting yourself in a short window where next year the 49ers are going into the offseason with $1 million in cap space. And then
mhm,
the year after they're going in with almost negative 2 years away. And you have a lot of guys that are getting older where 49ers window is pretty much this year and next year. After that,
mhm,
they're done. And you could even say after this year, uh, this might be their last year. Dolphins too, they're going to be in cap hell after this year. Eagles, we're starting to see that, especially when Jalen
mhm,
Hurts' contract extension goes into effect. So you can, at least the way that those three teams that you mentioned, it's funny you mentioned those as one category, is you're loading up, but you're also putting yourself in a very short window. At least
mhm.
the way that they went about acquiring their talent.
Yeah, and then the other option is that what receivers and running backs, they just don't last as long as a quarterback lasts. Like kind
Yeah.
of like what you're saying, where if you have a really good
Receivers last
quarterback,
longer, but
they
they don't
last
last
longer,
as
not as
long.
much as
Yeah.
running backs, but still, it's not like you're having um, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Ben Roethlisberger, all these guys that are known as really good quarterbacks that lead their teams. They did it really about until they're almost 40 or longer. And obviously Tom and Rogers are longer. Um, but wide receivers, really, they start breaking down after 30, 32, 33, 34. So you just don't have as long as a window. And it's a lot easier for a elite quarterback to cover up the mistakes of a team. And then sometimes you're going to need that elite game changing quarterback where they can stop a few of the other players. So you may just not have enough talent to actually overcome like a deficiency at the quarterback level. So again, going into that, the issues. We'll start with Mac here.
Yeah.
And again, both you and me, we're big fans of Mac coming out of college. We like what we saw in Alabama. We liked what we saw his rookie year. There was a lot of glimpses of it last year too, especially towards the end of the
Second
year.
half, yeah, the second half especially.
Um, and even this year, you look at the Eagles game, you look at the Dolphins game, and you look at different games here and there. He's
Bills
shown
game.
the Bills game. He's shown flashes where he could be a top 10 quarterback. And I'm still confident in saying that he could be a top 10 quarterback. I think where what we've learned from him this year is, and after watching just some of the different college players and some of the different just elite quarterbacks, is I don't think he'll ever have the ability to become one of those top three game changing elite quarterbacks that could put the whole team on his back and lift them up and make other players better. And I just don't think that's there with him. I think he lacks and again, I don't think everyone says he's got a noodle arm. I don't think he's got a noodle arm, but he needs things to go in the right situation to have good plays where the throws to the sideline are harder for him. He has to step into him. He can't just throw it off his back foot or on the run. He needs to get some oomph really into that. And it's not something he can really do without that. Whereas you look at like a Trevor Lawrence, or you look at Josh Allen, or you look at Hurts, or even you look at watching the college games this past weekend, you look at Penix. They have elite arm strength where they don't need to be in the best setup to make a really good throw, and that's something where even Tom, everyone says that he didn't have a great arm, but Tom could definitely do it. And there are throws and videos that you could see
He had a
that if
much
you look
better
at,
arm than people give him credit to,
yeah,
especially even early on against, I think it was what, 03, that Hail Mary to Troy Brown in overtime was
mhm,
just a bomb of
yeah.
a throw. And
So
yeah,
So again, with Mac, the biggest thing with him this year is that, and again, you look at him towards the last few games he played, were very different than the beginning of the season, and he's definitely mentally broken. So you can't always blame it on completely on the coaching staff and the team, just because um, it is also partly his fault. And I don't like blaming him for this. It's just something with him. But he also wasn't put in a great situation with the line play and the receivers, and it just made it tougher and just builds on you. So
yeah.
it's hard. It'd be hard for anyone uh, to be mentally strong enough to handle that situation. And it's just that as a pocket passer, you get sped up a ton when you're seeing that much pressure. And he's definitely probably had some sort of injury at one point where he probably didn't want to get hit as much, and that was causing some of the issues as well. So,
And
um,
another thing too is I think there were I think three of the first four games were the three highest pressure rates he faced in his entire career. And then
mhm,
after that, outside of the Bills game, he never really looked the same.
mhm,
And then I think also it kept getting in his head where he didn't trust his players, where you saw him in the Raiders game throw the bomb to uh what's not what Parker,
Parker.
and it went right through his hands. In the Commanders game, you saw him throw the bomb to Rieger, it went right through his hands.
Mhm,
In the Commander game, he threw the pass on fourth down or third down to Juju, and it went right through his hands. And then not
mhm,
only so he doesn't trust his players to make the plays, and he
mhm.
also doesn't trust his offensive line. So I think all of that just got into his head and just broke him. I don't I think he's pretty much done in New England unless something unforeseen happens. Um, I do wish him the best. It's kind of he was what again, like you said, I don't know if he has the talent to be a top five quarterback, but I think he can be successful, and hopefully this time off helps him build him back up. And I do hope that he has success where he goes.
Yep, exactly. I think the biggest thing for him would be a change of scenery,
Yeah.
or getting into it if there was a major change with the Patriots.
And the one thing that not many people talk about, which I do give him so much credit for, is his attitude, at least towards the media, has been
Mhm,
everything you could hope for. Even as tough as this season has been, he didn't throw anyone under the bus. He always blamed himself or wished that he played harder. Whereas if some of the college quarterbacks you see where after the game they don't talk to the media or things like that, if someone else was in this situation having to deal with what he's dealt with the last 2 years, especially,
mhm.
I don't know how many people would have that attitude towards the media of it's on me, I have to get better, instead of throwing someone under the bus.
Exactly. Even you watch him with Zappy, where he's the first one to congratulate him after a touchdown. He wishes him luck, everything like that. So he's definitely one, and this is why a lot of all of his teammates like him too, just because he's one of the good teammates out there to have. And again, I really like him a lot. I wish him that he'll see success in his NFL career. I don't think he has the talent just to be an NFL backup. He definitely can be um a really good start in the league, assuming that he had the right situation. Um, and I think getting into kind of why he was broken, like you said, the offensive line, the receivers, offensive line health was awful this year. So if you actually, when they had a healthy offensive line that were playing together for a while, they were actually pretty good. So
Yeah.
you have Trent Brown on the left side, which we'll get into him later, was when he's focused is one of the top left tackles in the league. Strange was playing really well. Andrews, and then So was one of the best guards in the league as a rookie. And then you had a
The
window
best rookie guard.
tackle.
He had some moments here and there where he's been
Mhm.
really good in the run game. He's had some deficiencies in the past game, but he's gotten better as the year went on, with this past game probably being his best.
Yep. So again, just the health at the O line was one thing, and the receivers as well. Health was a big thing there. All
Yeah,
right.
pretty much all their wide receivers have missed multiple games this year.
Yep. Okay. So we kind of went into what went wrong. We'll have more episodes and how are we gonna fix this? What they should do to what positions do they need to
Yeah.
focus on, who they need to focus on, the draft, all that sort of stuff.
And
So
if
we're gonna
I
have some good
and we're
guests
not
coming
gonna
up this
we're
off
not gonna
season.
talk about this week, but in the off season, I do have a specific plan of how I think this team can get back forward.
Okay.
Granted, I'm not the GM. That's probably good reason why I'm not, but I think in the off season that's when you can have some fun with this stuff. But
Yep. Okay. So the next situation is that we've seen a lot throughout these last few weeks or maybe month or so.
2 months, ever
2 months.
since
There's November.
even more, even it goes back to the Saints game. That's when the stuff first started coming
Mhm.
out.
We've seen a lot of kind of media smearing going on the last few months, especially from the Carins, the Bedards, the Callahans, a whole
Phil
bunch of other
Perry,
people. Phil Perry,
Breer,
um, who?
Albert Breer.
Oh, I always forget him because I don't even think of him as a real journalist.
Yeah, I know he's not, but people consider him to be, which is why
Well, it gets overblown. But
Regan.
there's been a lot of nonsense that's been reported. And if you follow us, you definitely should follow us. If you don't, on X or Twitter, Pat's 300 Level Pod. We do a really good job of calling out kind of the bullshit when we see it, and there's
Yeah.
been a lot of it. So,
And just full disclosure, everyone has biases, even us. We try to be as objective as we can.
mhm,
And we'll get to this in a little bit. We both think Bill should be back, which Mike, I at least both of us, I'm speaking for you, but I know
mhm,
you agree with this, is as an objective fan, I can completely understand wanting to move on from Belichick for specific reasons. This
mhm,
year, where you're going to have 100 million in cap space, you're going to have a top 3 pick. You think if you don't trust him to pick the players, and this is a important offseason considering all that, if you don't trust him
mhm,
to pick the players appropriately and he's not willing to concede player
mhm,
personnel, I understand moving on. I still want it, but I understand that objectiveness. But the people that are calling for his head, saying he should be fired, he's not a good coach anymore, things like
mhm.
that, it's that type of stuff that we try and call out the bullshit whenever it's there.
Exactly. And then so going into I think we'll get into why we'd prefer he would stay. So we'll get into that in a little bit, but we'll kind of get into kind of first of all one of the main articles and or reports that were out there was from and we kind of called out the second we saw it and then
Yeah.
we saw it backtracked because everyone knew the second they saw it it was complete horseshit. Was it
And
Tom Cut?
I don't think he was expecting it to get picked up the way it was.
Hmm.
But once it did, he kind of couldn't backtrack it then, but had to back it up, but then also
Hmm.
backtrack it at the same
Yeah.
time.
So Tom Curran had reported it was probably what a month ago that
It was in early December.
yeah. So he had reported that after the Colts game in Germany, that the Crafts had made up their mind and that Bill Belichick was going to be going after the end of the year. And number one, why would it be one game halfway through the season where they would make up their mind and be completely dead set saying, "Oh, this is the we're done,"
Yeah.
and then everyone calling him out saying this is ridiculous.
And then even one thing Boston Connor on Pat McAfee's show said perfectly is there's only 3 people that really know what's happening. Really
Mhm,
only 2, Robert and Bill. Even Jonathan, he might want something, but Robert's ultimately going to make the decision, or Bill's going to make the decision either
mhm,
way. But I to think that after one game in Germany halfway through the year where Mac Jones threw 2 interceptions inside the red zone where they lost by 4 points. That with one of the guys being wide open in the end zone, but hey, I know Mac Jones threw 2 interceptions, but this loss is on you, Bill. Pack your shit up. You're out.
Yeah. Like it's ridiculous. At some
Yeah.
point, you're gonna say, well, it's not the quarterback's fault. It's Bill's fault that he made these mistakes. Like it's insane. And then obviously he comes back and says the next day, "Oh, things can change."
Yeah.
Well, of
Oh,
course they can.
the decision has been made, but things can change.
And
Which,
then he said, "What? That wasn't a firm decision. It was a
yeah.
decision, but not a firm decision." And then every single week, and then this week, I think it was today or yesterday, he had said,
Even before that, he was saying last week he was saying, is Kraft going to get sentimental and not move on from Bill?
like he's almost
Get too
kind of
sentimental.
trying to taunt him into saying, like, "Oh, you're just being kind of a baby if you hold on to him. You're not thinking clearly. You're thinking with your emotions and not rationally by doing that." And then today or yesterday, he said, "Oh, what did he say?" We'll pull up the clip if I can't get it. Oh, he said it's basically in Bill's court now.
Yeah.
It's not even in Robert's court. So like that completely changes the fact that Kraft had his decision made up 2 months ago to I have no idea what's going on. And I'm clearly showing I have no idea what's going on because there's only 3 people out there that know. And if there were more that knew it, it's not going to be Tom Curran that's reporting it.
Yeah.
It's going to be Adam Schefter because the only person that gets information from Robert Kraft that's that like concrete and that held up
Or Mike Reese.
is either Mike Reese, Adam Schefter, or Ian Rappaport. Ian's usually more a pro Bill kind of guy. And then Shefty sometimes too will get some Bill stuff. But it's one of those 3 guys that would know something. It's not Tom Curran, it's not Phil Perry, it's definitely not Greg Bedard. And you'll see that again with Greg, where he had a few different things.
But
One,
before you get into that too, is I know after Curran was saying, "Oh, things can change," and some people that want Bill gone are saying, if when people were mocking Curran for saying that, we were like, "Oh, you've never went back on the decision you made." If you're the best owner in sports, the most powerful owner in sports, and you've come to the decision that you're moving on from the greatest coach of all time, that's not something that you can wane on. If you come to that decision, you can consider it. I completely would understand if Robert was considering it or leaning that way. But to say you've made that decision after 24 years of being with him, 25 if you count 1996, 6 championships, 9 Super Bowl appearances, 10 if you count 96, where you made that decision, that's not something you're going to sway where, oh, if we win 2-3 games the end of the year, I'm going to let him back.
Yeah, it's not like, oh, I picked the veal parm, but you know what? I'm really feeling the big ziti right now instead.
If you've come to this decision, it's not something at this point you can go back on.
Yeah. So again, next person, and again, this isn't going to just be a laundry list of us attacking everyone, but these are the 2 people I think we felt like we wanted to really kind of address just because they're the most kind of horseshit of the bunch. And Bedard had a couple ones. One was a hit piece that he had on Gerard Mayo. By trying to say that he's rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And, you know, as a coach, you kind of got to do it. And Gerard even said that. And this was just clearly just a hit piece trying to get some clicks to try and make it seem like Gerard's an issue. And he's not. He's definitely not. Of all the people there, Gerard is not one of the issues around there. Everyone speaks of him glowingly. The players
and it's pure
love him.
speculation too, because is it possible that some coaches are annoyed that reports are saying Mayo's going to be the next head coach and there's some power shift because Robert's going to move on from Bill and then have Mayo? Is that possible? Sure, it's possible. Anyone could guess that. Do I think it's actually happening? No. And you're not for anyone to be reporting that, it's not going to be Greg Bedard who gets that piece.
Yeah. You know, you could say, "Oh, is Steve annoyed that Gerard may take over and then he'll be out of a job too?" Like, yeah, maybe, but Steve's not going to tell him that.
Yeah,
well, Steve's more likely to tell Babs that he is annoyed than he is to tell Greg Bedard.
Yeah.
It just one thing after another from him this year. He's just trying to get
Kevin,
clicks.
he's not been like that this year. He's been like this his whole career. I've been trying to tell you this for 5 freaking years.
It's gotten worse. Year after year after year, it's gotten worse. And then
he's been a serial liar his whole time in Boston. I've been
Okay.
trying to tell you
Well,
this.
actually, if we're gonna get onto that, everyone should Google his SI story he had on Aaron Hernandez on the Super Bowl week, where he said that he proclaimed that he grabbed Aaron Hernandez when he was peeing on a cab car and saying, "Oh, you're better than this," and got him to stop peeing on a cab car. So like that just doesn't pass the smell test. So that's just something everyone should Google right now. If you're listening, pause, put this on pause, Google that, read the whole story, and say, does this pass the smell test, or does this sound like a Kevin Cullen article from the Boston Globe? So that's one thing to look at. Number two, with Bedard this week, having the report saying that his sources say that Bill Belichick is going to be going into the meeting with Kraft on Monday, the 8th, with a game plan. Well, no shit. He he's not gonna go meet with him and say, I have no plan. I don't know what I'm gonna do. We'll figure it out. I've won 6 Super Bowls. We'll figure it out. Of course he's gonna have a game plan on how he's gonna change this over. This is not just an average season where they're 8-8 or 8-9 now, or 9-8, where like, oh, some things went wrong, some things went bad. They're gonna have a sub 500 record, and not just by a little bit, but by a lot.
They're gonna have the third or fourth worst record in football.
Yeah, and one of the worst record in his career. So obviously he's going to change things. He's going to want things changed. So he's not going to go in there saying, I have no plan. So it's just one thing after another. It's a little ridiculous. And I think we spent a little bit more time than we expect on this. So the last thing we wanted to hit on was the Doug Kyed article. And Eric and I both respect a ton on
Doug
Doug.
Kyed and Andrew Callahan, they both wrote it from the Boston Herald today.
So Eric and I respect Doug a ton. He's been right on a lot of the things he's reported this last year. He's been really first on a lot of the news that's come out, and then someone else reports it afterwards.
There's several Boston, there aren't many, but there's several Boston reporters or analysts that I trust. Mike Reese and Doug Kyed are the top two.
Mm-hmm.
So if an article was coming out, like we were saying, by Bedard, by Phil Perry, by Curran, someone along those lines, I wouldn't put much to it just because I don't trust them.
Mm-hmm.
With this coming from Doug Kyed, it does make me pause a little bit, and it's not a great look on the Patriots or Bill, but we can get into that in a minute. But I do trust Kyed. I don't trust Callahan, but I do trust Kyed.
Yeah,
but
I was going to press with that where it was a combined article from the two of them, so you don't know who's reporting what, which makes it a little bit tougher. Just because a lot of the stuff that Callahan's had this year, in the year before, has been kind of spotty. So
some seems good, some is a little questionable.
Yeah, and you can even see that if you get into there. It's a pretty long article. And we're not going to go through line by line with it. But I figured, I think you were the one that took the most notes. So if you want to hit kind of the highlights, and we can kind of talk about it.
Yeah, so I think the biggest piece that came from this was that in the offseason, Bill wanted to move or go forward this year with Patricia and Judge at offense. Kraft is the one that pretty much put the kibosh on that and said, no, you have to get a new offensive coordinator. And then Bill relented and brought in Bill O'Brien, which, if you kind of look at it, Bill wanted to run things back. And at the end of last year, you did see the offense getting a little better. But the offense this year is actually worse than it was last year. So maybe Bill had a point there.
And that's something we've kind of talked about too, where I wonder if part of the reason why this offense has struggled is the fact that it's too complicated and it's too complex. Where the whole point last year, what their game plan was they wanted to simplify things and make things faster and easier. And it's hard to run the Earnhardt Perkins system. We talked about this with Jerry last episode. It's just harder and harder each year to do it, with just the lack of practice time, and then the type of players that you're getting nowadays, where they're not used to running all this stuff in college. They're running a lot more fast things, and it's a lot harder for them to pick up on. And there's a reason why there's not many teams there's really no other team that runs this system anymore. Because it's pretty much flamed out everywhere. It's gone. So it's just a lot harder to run. And is the reason why that they had more success last year is part of it just because it was simpler and easier to understand for these players, and they don't have to think as much. And I think that's part of it. And again, that's what also kind of hurt Mac last year was the fact that he's built to run this system where it's using his mind and be able to make checks and all that sort of stuff. But if the players aren't following your direction and understanding where they're supposed to go, it doesn't matter how smart you are. It's not going to work. So, and I think that's maybe why he had more success towards the end of the year, where they were figuring out ways to kind of put in some stuff, but make it still simple. So,
Yeah.
maybe it's looking Bill might have been right, and maybe Patricia would have been the better option to have here. And
Yeah.
who knows? Maybe it wasn't, but
And there's another thing in that section that kind of ticked me. The way that it was worded was that Bill didn't put a good faith into selecting an offensive coordinator because he only interviewed Bill O'Brien and then four other people who have never been actual coordinators. But if you actually look at it, who was really available with coordinating experience that would run a system similar to what Bill was running? You're going into your third year with your quarterback. You're not going to want to change things drastically for 3 straight years. You're going to want to be running a similar system where they trusted Mac, they liked him. At least that's what reports are. You're not going to change things up completely, especially for the offense you built. So you're going to want people that you either know personally or run your systems. So he interviewed people that he had some connections with. One was a receiver for him, Jefferson, Adrian Clem, Bill O'Brien, and then there was a couple others. But to say that he didn't put a good faith into the process, I don't think is accurate. I could be wrong, but based on that, there wasn't really anyone with coordinating experience unless you're going to bring Charlie Weiss out of 12-year retirement to do it. It's just not really the case.
Exactly. You don't see any other really coordinators get really sought after. And so you're going to have to get someone that doesn't have coordinating experience. So
Yeah.
that's probably one of the reasons why. And then the other option, which I don't think was mentioned in the article, but he had mentioned in a podcast with Taylor Kyles. I got his name right?
Yeah.
I always confuse him with Tyler or Taylor.
Yeah.
So Taylor Kyles was that some of the wide receiver options that they had interviewed, they were possibly hoping that they might come on board as an assistant coach. And I think you can get into kind of why that might have been.
Yeah, I was actually going to just get into that next, where the next part of the article was talking about how Bill O'Brien wanted to clear house and Bill Belichick didn't, at least on the offensive side. But he did allow Bill O'Brien to bring in his tight end coach from Houston, where if that is accurate, it's not like the Patriots had 10 offensive coaches on offense and Bill wasn't letting him clear any of them. They only really had 5 or 6. There's Troy Brown, and then I almost said Demario Douglas, Ross Douglas, who ended up leaving. Yeah. And then offensive line was Matt Patricia, who left. And then Billy Yates as assistant offensive line coach. They brought in Adrian Clem. So they did bring in one new coach. They brought in the new tight end coach. And then there's the running back coach who's pretty well respected. I'm blanking on his name. And then
Vinny Sinceri.
Yeah. So it's only really 4 or 5 coaches that they really kept. And then they still did bring in 2 new assistant coaches as well. So to really say that Bill O'Brien was put in a poor situation to succeed because he couldn't bring in his own coaching staff, which the article alludes to, I don't think is a fair and accurate statement. If this was really a sticking point, Bill O'Brien wouldn't go to a place where he didn't think he'd be put in a situation to succeed. A head coach that had success in Houston, brought Brian Hoyer to the playoffs, had success at Penn State after the situation he was put in there, had success at Alabama. He wouldn't come to a situation where he wouldn't be successful because he couldn't operate the way he wanted to. So I didn't think that was a fair characterization. It might have been editorial writing for how it was written, but that was one thing that kind of ticked me off. Not ticked me off, but I don't think it's appropriate to say. He might have wanted to, but also the article later in the article said the Boston Herald could not corroborate that Bill O'Brien wanted to clear house either. So they insinuated it, but they even said they couldn't back it up.
Yep. And then the other thing too is that there were reports back before was that Bill O'Brien sat in the interview with Adrian Clem to interview him for the offensive line coach. So it's
Yep.
not like he didn't have any say whatsoever
Yep.
there.
And that kind of leads to the next point of what you were talking about was I know some people or a lot of people think it's probably time to move on from Troy Brown as wide receiver coach, where this wide receiver group has underperformed. And one thing Kyle was saying on the podcast with Taylor Kyles was two of the people that came in to interview, either two or three, including Jefferson, were wide receiver coaches. And he wasn't positive, but was kind of insinuating that it might have been thoughts that Bill knew the deficiencies that this wide receiver group had and wanted to address it, whether it was actually having them as offensive coordinators if they didn't go with O'Brien, or possibly having them sign on as wide receiver coaches to help improve this situation. They just couldn't get it done. Where if you are wide receiver coach at another team, it's kind of tough to move laterally unless the organization allows you, if your contract is still going on. So that might have been part of it, or they just couldn't agree to terms on that.
And then the other hard thing with that was that those would be lateral positions for those coaches that were still in the contract. Where I think one of the things that they were kind of maybe hoping for too was that I forgot which coach it was, but one of the coaches was on part of the Arizona coaching group, and they were maybe hoping that he was going to get let go. And maybe it just didn't happen in the time, or I don't think it did happen actually. So
Yeah.
it's just harder to try and get one of those receivers to take a lateral move when they're under contract, unless they get a promotion. Anything else about the Kayat article you want to address, or do you
Yeah,
want to
there
move
were a
on?
couple things. I'm trying to pull it back up. Let's see. Another thing too, which it talked about, was in the article, it was saying that people in the organization were curious as to what their approach was this past offseason at offensive tackle, especially considering the deficiencies that the offensive tackle position on this team has had, and how they could have done it better. Which I was going to, I texted Kevin. I texted you this morning when I saw this, and then on the interview with Doug Hyde with Taylor Kyles, he even brought this up that the offensive tackle position was kind of weak both in free agency, the draft, and trades. In the first round of the draft, I don't think anyone would pass up Christian Gonzalez for anyone that was on the board at that time. So you can't really question that pick. There wasn't really anyone else after that for offensive tackle. You could argue maybe DeJuan Jones, but as Taylor Kyle said, every single team passed on DeJuan Jones at least 3 times. So there were probably some off-field issues that were question marks that made you curious of if you want to draft him or not. In free agency, the top guys that went, they got a huge contract, and they're among the league leaders in pressure rate this year. And then also, if you're giving out those contracts, it's not something that you can really say, oh, we'll go this year and see. It's a long-term investment. And if you don't think they're the right fit for your team, that's not something you want to do, especially in the salary cap era. So they kind of were proven right. And that's something Doug Hyde said, was that his sources were saying that even though the approach didn't work, it didn't not work because of that. But that's something the article left out entirely as well. And it alluded to that they should have done things differently, but at least this offseason, there wasn't really things to do differently except maybe move a 1-year to right tackle. But
But even
again,
then, he wasn't healthy enough to play the
he
first.
wasn't healthy enough, and you'd also be starting with Cole Strange out to begin the year. You'd be starting 2 rookies at guard.
And that's not something they usually like to do.
Yeah.
There.
And
Anything
then
else?
a couple other things was that Jack Jones blew up on the Patriots cornerback coach the day before he was cut, which probably happened. I
Probably,
can
yeah, I
definitely
wouldn't.
see that.
Yeah.
Adrian Clem having an outburst at Mac Rowe saying that the talent, he needs more talent on the offensive line, which, I mean, I could see that, especially with the injuries. The other thing too that the article alluded to, which kind of gave me pause, was that part of the reason why they brought in back Adrian Clem is he coached under Belichick. Or he played under Belichick, so he knew the system. But when he came in after coaching in different places, Pittsburgh, Oregon, a couple other places, that he brought in new techniques and was teaching those techniques, and it didn't really fit the system of what the Patriots wanted. And people were questioning why he was brought in if he was bringing this outside perspective. But earlier on, the article was complaining about how they didn't look outside the system for other coaches, which is one of the deficiencies. So you can't really have it both ways. And
Mhm.
again, I don't know if that's editorial writing, if things like that. But another interesting piece, probably the last thing I'll say about the article, was that after Adrian Clem's health issues, Bill Belichick has essentially taken on the role of coaching the offensive line. And we've seen the offensive line actually improve lately. Cole Strange was playing the best football of his career up until he got hurt. City So was playing well. Trent Brown was playing well until he got hurt. So it was interesting to see when that went on, he took over part of the reins. He might have not been holding the meetings, but he was taking over leading that group.
Mhm.
And in addition to that, James Ferentz was also taking on a role essentially as a coach, which might be something with Adrian Clem probably won't be back next year. Health reasons as well as the differences and things like that, where it makes me wonder if James Ferentz might be, assuming Belichick's back, James Ferentz might maybe take a coaching role or something like that.
Yep. Or they might just keep him on the practice squad.
Yeah,
And I think he gets paid more that way than he would be as a coach. So,
that's true. Got
um,
paid $250,000 to be a coach.
yeah. So anyway, going on. After all this info, after what's going wrong, after the Kayat article, after the horse shit that Karin and Bedard have spewed, we get into now one of the last few topics is Bill's future with the team, and something that we never like talking about because a lot of it we didn't want to talk about too much going into the other episodes, just because a lot of it's being used for clicks. But again, we're here last week of the year. There'll probably be a decision made. Probably by this time next week, we should probably know what's going to happen. If he's here or not. So, yeah. Again, Eric and I have both said that we think that Bill should stay. I think we each of us can kind of go on. You did a lot of talk at the Kayed one, so I'll go first about kind of why I think, and I think you kind of share the same sentiment as I do. And again, it's not just you that he's done so much for the organization, because that doesn't mean he's going to continue doing that. So that's one thing that New England's known for, is that you don't pay for past performance, you pay for
Yeah.
what's going to happen in the future. And again, Bill's done a ton, and he's continued to do a lot. Again, if you look at this team, you look to see what has gone wrong, and we said this: if you had just average quarterback play, they would be a playoff contender this year. So do you put just not having average quarterback play? Do you just fire Bill because of that? Do you get rid of everything that has going on with his organization, the top defense that you have, the inner workings that you have, and are you automatically going to get better by getting rid of Bill, or are you going to actually need a quarterback to do it? And if you the argument is always going to get rid of Bill, they haven't done well, and they're going to put Gerard Mayo in there. You have no idea how Gerard Mayo is going to be as a coach. He could be good, but is he going to be as good as Bill because he's grown up from the Bill stuff? No, he's not. So if you're going to go that route, what's the point of doing it? Doing that decision whatsoever, because Bill is the best to ever run the system, and you don't know what's going to happen with Gerard. And that's the other thing. There's a lot of bad coaching out there.
Yep.
And you look at this team, they're not bad, they're not poorly coached. They're in every single game that they're in, except for those two blowout games. They've been in every single game. This team has not quit at all. And you would see a ton of other teams, players quitting left and right, not giving any effort, not caring. This team wants to win. They want to keep playing for each other. And that's a credit to Bill, because he keeps focusing week after week. He's not looking to the future. He's not looking what's going to happen after this year. He's only looking at the next week. And he puts the team in the best position to win. So again, has he had some failings with player personnel? Yes. Is that all of his fault? I'm going to say no, because I think part of the reason is that we saw this, and we've alluded to this before in other podcasts, was the Vrabel Hall of Fame speech that he gave, and even the Scarnecchia one. where Bill relies on his staff to do a lot of talent evaluation for players.
Yeah.
So Scar had to personally work out a ton of offensive linemen and give his report and saying which one would fit, which one would not. And just the amount of brain drain that this team has seen, especially because of the Josh McDaniels when he left, he took a lot of people with him. He took a lot
Yeah.
of offensive coaches with him. He took a
And
lot of scouts.
personnel.
Yeah, him and Ziegler took a ton of scouts and people from player personnel and basically wiped this organization clean.
And
So
that's a year or two after Joe Judge and Brian Flores both became head coaches, and
mhm,
Caserio went to Houston and took some of their own people as well.
yeah.
So they lost some people in the 2 or 3 prior years just from those three people moving on.
Mhm,
And then McDaniels and Ziegler just gutted it on
yeah.
top of that.
And I never realized how much they gutted the organization until I had reading another story about it recently.
Yeah.
And what's Bill going to honestly do with he has to he can't coach and be the GM 24/7, and he's just said that too. That's why you have to have guys there that you trust and can do the job. And I just don't think Matt Groh and his staff have done it. I don't think that it's completely their fault just because they weren't put in a great position because of everyone that had left. But I do put a lot of blame on him and his staff, and you hear kind of what players have said. Even Adrian Klum going off on Grow and not on Bill. That a lot of this is the talent evaluation that they have and the options that they have. You hear Grow during after the draft. You want to get fast players, you draft fast players. To draft Thornton because of that. That sounded more like a Grow pick than something that Bill would say, and something Bill would want. And then even the Juju Smith-Schuster, the reports came out that Bill wanted Jacoby Myers, Grow and his staff wanted Juju and convinced Bill on that. So anyway, because of that, I don't put all of the blame on personnel on Bill. I think he does need help. I think he needs offensive help, and he's still a great coach, and he's shown that. So I think as long as he kind of relents and gives someone some player personnel control, I would more than I would definitely want him back in that position, whether it be Ziegler, whether it be Casario, what have you. Um, anything you want to add to that?
No, that's pretty much it. Is that at least as a head coach, X's and O's, I think Bill has shown that he's still got it. Even the Kite article is saying how everyone in the organization is saying, leading up to the game, Bill is saying this and this is going to happen, and because of that, this is going to happen, and just week in and week out, it happens. Everything Bill says is going to happen is going to pretty much happens. It's just they don't have enough players that can really execute the game plan accordingly, which goes to the shortcomings of the player personnel aspect. But I think Bill's not stupid or stubborn enough to say that it's not his fault or things should keep going status quo going forward. I think
Mhm.
he's going to be open to making changes. And I think as a head coach, he's in a position where you just have to fix some things on offense. It's not a ton of pieces. We'll get into this in the offseason episode. It's not a ton that they really need to change. One of the biggest ones is quarterback, which is huge. But on another thing too is part of the reason why they're in the situation in the offseason of having a ton of cap space is Bill always looked to the future where he wasn't selling out for 1 year.
Mhm.
And because of that, they're not he if he really was worried about his job security, he realistically could have said after 8 and 9, things maybe we're not in a position to win it all. I'm gonna go all out this offseason, mortgage the future so that I can keep my job. He didn't do that.
Mhm.
He kept looking forward to this upcoming year, but keeping or making sure that the future wasn't mortgaged as well, so that it's a sustainable amount of success. Granted, they didn't have success this year, but
Yep. Okay. So then we've said what we want to happen. We're gonna say what we think is gonna happen. I'll let you go first.
so I still think Bill is back. Um, Pretty much all the former players, a lot of the current players are saying that you need to keep Bill. And as we've seen, there's so much bad coaching in the NFL. Even Josh McDaniels, who a lot of people said was going to be the successor, he was going to learn from Denver. He didn't, and he was just a colossal failure. Where the grass isn't always greener on the other side. I think the player personnel aspect is going to be an important consideration, but I do think Bill is going to either relent or be fine that if someone that I trust is put in this position, we'll agree on who that is, Casario, Ziegler, someone that they both trust, where
Mm-hmm.
I think he'd be open to that. But I think considering everything, considering Bill's legacy, considering how the team didn't give up, where if Ben Johnson was coaching this team, are they 4-12 right now? I don't think so. Even Vrabel, who people are saying should take over, he only has one more win in a worse division, and he's someone that hasn't had success on offense really.
Mm-hmm.
So who are you going to be replacing Bill with? There's not many people, or really anyone you can really say replacing Bill with this guy. This team is going to be better going forward.
Yeah,
So I think
like
because of
Brian
everything,
Flores,
yeah,
who we both like, has fired offense coordinator every single year that he
yeah,
was head coach.
yep. So I think Bill's going to stay. I completely would understand moving on from him, considering you're going to have a top 3 or 4 pick. You're going to have 100 million in cap space. If there's ever a time to cut bait and go forward, it would be this time. So I understand that. But also, I don't know how you can fire Bill and then bring in, say, Gerard Mayo, where Bill, you're gone, but I'm hiring someone who's only coached for you to take your place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think my prediction is the same thing. I think that Bill stays. And I think number one, everything you said, and I think the other thing too is that, and I forget who said this. I think it was Gronkowski or someone else. It's going to be really hard for Robert, and we know how Robert is. He's and not to kind of get into the current aspect, but he's also he understands legacy. He understands his own legacy is a big thing, and I think it's going to be really tough for him to move on from both Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. I think that's a really hard thing for him to swallow, where he doesn't want to be the one that to let Tom Brady leave and have him win a Super Bowl, and then have Bill Belichick leave. And odds are, if Bill's going somewhere, he's going to making sure he's going in the best possible situation for him to win in the next year or two, because he doesn't have much time left. He's probably only be coaching for another 33 years, 34 years at most. And he's going to want to win, and he's going to go to a place that allows him to do it. So I don't think Robert's going to want to see him leave and win elsewhere. It's going to just not look great, and it's going to make him seem like he didn't make great decisions at the end. So I think that's one big thing, and I think that Bill isn't an idiot, like you said. I think he's going to go into there saying, "Hey, I've had some shortcomings on player personnel. We both know that, and I
On
want
the
to bring
offensive
in."
side,
On the offensive side, and I want to bring this person in or this person in who's going to have final say or what have you, and have more say in what's going on, and then either relieve Matt Grove of his duties, or technically he's not the full GM, so maybe give someone else the full GM job, and then he still reports to him. I don't know if he'd like that, but he's technically under contract, so he has to deal
yeah.
with it. So, I see that happening, but I wouldn't be shocked either way. I'm going on the aspect that it's going to be Bill moving forward.
Yeah, and we'll find out in 5 days or so.
All right, sounds good. We were going to talk about draft position. Just the skinny on that is they can't do any worse than number 5 supposedly. It was
Dakota Randall.
Dakota Randall ran all the simulations on I think PFF or something like that. Yeah, supposedly they could do no worse than 5th, and they could get to the second round pick.
Number 2
The
pick.
second number, yeah, the number 2 overall pick, depending on what happens. I don't want to go through all the different scenarios because there's too many and it hurts everyone's brain. Thing is, next week we'll know what happens. So
Yep.
we'll see what happens. We'll get into the draft talk. And that's pretty much it. So we're gonna leave you after I do a little wrap up with a little 5-minute clip for the Kirk Minahan show that I think really kind of describes some of the stuff we are talking about, Curran and Bedard, and I think better detail and better description than what we may have done. And I think it was a really interesting clip.
And Kirk
to
is
listen
also
to.
friends with Jonathan Kraft too, correct?
That's another big thing. Kirk is friendly with Jonathan Kraft. Kraft gives him Springsteen tickets every year, and I think he's a listener of the show too, from what he said. So if anyone knows it's gonna happen, it's him more than Cameron or Bedard. So it's not surprising when you hear some of the stuff coming out, and so he's sometimes very forceful with his predictions, and that may be some inner working. So that could possibly be it. So again, thank you everyone for listening. This is a long episode. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review us. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter, Pat's 300 Level Pod, and our website. We're going to start doing some blogs in the off season, Pat's 300 300levelpod.com. I'm going to finally get that site up and running really full time. At least a few blogs weekly to catch up, and then our big thing is on Twitter X for a really fast minute breaking news. So thank you very much, and I look forward to talking to you guys next time, and hopefully Bill is still the coach when we talk to you guys next.
Can I get one Kirk Minahan sports take from you?
Sure, if I want it, yeah.
Bill Belichick, is this his last game Sunday?
No, I told you.
How do you feel about it?
Kirk Minahan guarantees he's back next year. This is a study in reporters, local reporters.
I'm bringing up Greg Bedard.
Making shit up, whether it's Greg or Curran. These guys throw so much shit against the wall that if something sticks, they'll take credit. And if it doesn't stick, they'll just be like, oh, yeah, it changed.
Did you see that clip yesterday?
The Bedard one?
Yeah.
He's just making it.
It's unbelievable.
With Mayo or he was on with Felger and Maz?
Felger and Maz.
I saw the clip. Yeah, he's just making shit up.
It's unbelievable.
He's a professional liar. Like, he just makes stuff up. And, like, he knows that, like, it doesn't really matter. No one's going to call him out on it. So you just throw it out there. It's not true. I like the idea that people are like, I saw a report yesterday, like Belichick's going into his meeting with Kraft with a game plan. Well, no shit. He's trying to keep his fucking job. What's he supposed to go in there and be like Gus? Be like, oh, like if
Robert Kennedy Jr.
If Kraft said to him, what's your plan for next year? And Belichick's like, but like, he's fucking Bill Belichick. Like, I don't even understand the argument about that. It was like that clip a few months ago that idiot Gresh put out. That video clip of like of Robert talking to Kraft and being like, that video of them after the interception, like Germany, and being like, boy, we're not very good right now.
Oh, yeah.
Jonathan, and everyone's like, holy shit. I'm like, well, they're not very good. What's he supposed to fucking say?
And did you see that interception?
Yeah.
It's the fucking worst thing I've ever seen in my life.
Like, everyone's like, wow, this means Belichick's like, my thing is, I would say to Belichick, if I was Kraft, hey, are you in this for 3 or 4 more years? If you're not, just tell me now. No problem. But if you want to do this, we're going to give you 3 years. This is your job. You want to draft a quarterback? We're doing that. I'm telling you right now, we're drafting a quarterback.
Yeah.
That's other than that, everything's yours. But we're pick the best quarterback.
You pick the quarterback, but we're taking a quarterback.
We're doing it. Other than that, I'm totally hands off. You've earned that. And if Belichick says no, then I give him credit. He's like, I don't want to draft a quarterback. Then Kraft says, okay, you're gone.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. But like this thing where like if you think people are talking, I'll say this, there's clearly camps. Like every time Rapport has a story, it's pro Belichick. So somebody in Belichick's world is talking to him, whether it's his assistants or I don't think it's Belichick necessarily, but any of those people. And then if it's somebody else, it's anti. So like everyone has moles.
Bedard doesn't have moles. No chance anyone that office is talking to him.
No, it's like low level bullshit.
Listen, like, I think the Boston media, the biggest criticism is the Volan thing. When Volan got duped by, was it one of your listeners?
I think it might have been.
I think it was someone connected to the show.
It might have been, probably.
Like who sent him the email saying, I have a friend inside.
Year, yeah.
So those guys literally are just taking anything.
Of course.
From anyone and running with it.
Look at Porges a couple of years ago. Like, the guy pretending he was Don Yee. He just believed it. People, I had Shaughnessy on the ropes a year and a half ago so he figured it out. Like, I was literally pretending I was somebody in the financial office. Tony Maz. Yeah, Tony Maz is threatening to sue me. Change his phone number. So, like, I mean, and I get it, like, initially because they want it to be true.
Yes.
But then you have to.
Because they hate Belichick, too.
Yeah, and they just want to have a big story, too. Like, they want this to be, like, I mean.
How come Curran can come out and say, after the Germany game, if they lose, Belichick's gone? And then Tuesday be like, well, we heard some things. It's not even, there's no standing by the report. Right. There's no.
And if Belichick loses his job at the end of the year, he will then go back on that and take a victory lap. Yeah. And if he doesn't, he'll be like I said, like things change. Like they played hard. And if you see now the media, what they've done the last few weeks,
they're already walking it back.
Because they know the line they're going with now is like, these guys aren't quitting on Bill.
Yeah.
Like they're playing hard for him. Like he should be back. I've seen a couple of somebody in the Globe. They should bring him back.
After they beat Denver on Christmas Eve, that was a big thing.
Yeah, and they'll beat the Jets this week probably. And they'll be
Bill's
like,
not losing the last game to the Jets.
And I will say they've played hard for. I think all year they've played pretty hard. Like I think and I think I'm not gonna get too sporty, but the one thing I do watch is still some of the Patriots. Like this defense next year, they're gonna have those two guys come back. The first round pick. That defense is gonna be really good if they pick a good quarterback.
Watch out.
They can win 8 or 9 games, and then all of a sudden it's like, and then the stories will be, geez, you never give up on Belichick. It turns out, and they're going to do the same fucking thing.
Yeah.
And I do think the difference, the one good thing about Twitter and social media, as I've said, is it's governed and weeded out how stupid this media, how easy it is to pick apart their bullshit, which I used to do in the old show, is you just pick apart, like I read Bedard, I'm like, oh, he's just making that up.
Yep.
He's just making, like he's, and he wants, and I know, several people who know have told me, that he thought he was going to get a job with McDaniels in that organization, Bedard. And he was telling everybody that.
Doing what?
It's like a scout.
He thinks he's like a football coach.
Yeah, and
he's never come out and said what happened at the Review Journal, which is a crazy.
Right, he was there for like 20 days.
It's a weird story.
Yeah, that story about Aaron Hernandez taking a piss. It's just all,
yeah.
he's like, he went to Hernandez's face, and it's just like,
he
I like Greg. Whenever I see Greg, I've always got along with him. But
Didn't he stop Hernandez from like beating somebody up?
yeah, he's like, hey man, cut the shit out.
Shit.
He's like Hernandez. He's like, and Bedard's like, what do you do? Kill me or whatever? It's like, this is bullshit. They're all full of shit.
Oh man.
Yeah. I hope Belichick's back. I don't want somebody else coaching the
Me
Patriots.
too.
You fucking bring in who? Mayo? Like he's the
Same guy.
Yeah.
Hire a real offensive coordinator, and let's get a quarterback and run it back.
Andy Mayo in tomorrow, not Gerard Mayo. And with Mutt. Mutt would be more excited about Gerard Mayo, but yeah.
I was confused there for a minute.
Mutt and Mayo tomorrow, which I think will be an interesting combination. Everyone hates Mayo. You know, why did Mayo block you?
He was tweeting about the Disney thing.